Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am going to struggle to observe all the protocols, but I know that if I do not acknowledge Prince David, I probably will be in trouble. So anyone else that I haven't acknowledged appropriately, please forgive me. But I would also like to acknowledge the Masilela family. I'm personally acquainted with, I call him Commissioner Masilela. So maybe I've heard they call him Elias here and other names, but to me he's Commissioner Masilela. And most importantly, the people who have brought us together here, the widows of the struggle. Amongst them are my sisters, who I will talk about in detail in a little while. But I'm taken back to the time when Commissioner Masilela asked me to do this address. And he had been trying to get hold of me for a while to get me to commit to come and do this. So I wasn't dodging him, but our times were just not connecting. Eventually he cornered me because I kept on saying to me, tell me in an email or send me an SMS because we are just not connecting. But he wanted to do it in person. And when eventually he did corner me in between, I think, meetings that we had for about 5 or 10 minutes and told me what this was about, I will confess that I did shed a little tear because he was talking about some of the people who are very dear to my heart. And when I said to him, I know this, I know this, I know that, he said, precisely why I want you to speak. So I am used to speaking at business functions. And most of the time, somebody writes the speech for me. And I just have become accomplished at pretending that it was written by me. So this is one speech that no one can write for you, including myself. My husband and I, by the way, Miss Fakuza, Mrs. Khanyisile. So ngizobulawa mina ekhaya ukuthi uma ngifike eSwazini sengibizwa ngoKhanyisile Kweyama. But that's fine. That's the professional name people have been used to for many years. So even as I was for night after night, at the end of the day, I would get home and read my book and start to write, and I would erase and write and erase and write. So my husband, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, was journeying along with me as I was preparing to speak today. And in that time, I deliberately didn't speak to one particular person who is my sister, Usis Dudu, because she has been my sister for many years. We went together we had the same high school, even though at different times. I know when Ubudbadi and Victor Fakudze used to come to South Africa and paint the town red. And many, many young girls wanted to capture their hearts. So eventually when he settled on my own sister, who was Miss this, Miss Intervarsity, Miss this, he chose the best when he came to South Africa. So it was a buzz of Kwamashu everywhere about this Badi Fakudze, who managed to come and capture one of the most beautiful women in South Africa and make her his wife. So when he had a terrible accident in a month that he was born in, it obviously hit many of us because they were still young, they were newlyweds, and it was just very devastating. But subsequent to that, I have seen Usis Dudu grow spiritually, grow professionally, and she has had an impact not only on myself, but my whole family. We have been together through many, many different tragedies, including the loss of her son, who also sadly passed away in the month of his and his father's birth date. And we were with her when she went through that whole journey. So you can imagine that you were a young princess that got married, and suddenly you are widowed, you have children to raise. She went on to do great work in the United States. She has worked in some of the most prestigious libraries in the world, and she kept the Fakudze name flying very high. I then had an opportunity to meet Ufelicia, who was also widowed at a very young age. And she was also raising children. But in spite of that, she became a professional woman. She has worked in the private sector, she has worked in government, and has just always remained a pillar of strength and a true example of what women can do against all odds. I was introduced to Carla at a house of a common friend who had spent some time in Mozambique, the Ngutjane family. And you know how it is when you are introduced to somebody and you are told that it is the widow of so-and-so. And you don't know whether to reach out and hug them, but you are also weary of not patronizing. I also had the opportunity, Swaziland has sheltered me at some stage in my life. So when I was young, 19, 20, and I also had the urge and the desire to go and fight for our country, my ex-husband had already left and was living in Swaziland, and we joined him with the children. And some of the people that I went through who were checking me and vetting me and making sure that I was what I said I was. Dotsi was one of them. I have heard that unfortunately she couldn't be with us today. And as I read through all the stories, it was obviously stories that we have read, stories of people we have interacted with, stories of people that we had had a near miss, that at some stage you were 5 minutes away from where somebody was assassinated, an hour away from where somebody was killed. I also come from Pretoria, so you can imagine that this is some of the images that, or rather some of the memories that went through my mind as I was reflecting on what I would do today. Part of the reason Commissioner Masilela could not get hold of me, or that we couldn't connect and we just had to connect for 5 minutes, is that I was on my way to the World Economic Forum in Kigali. And one of the things I did when I was in Kigali during some spare time is to visit the memorial to the genocide in Kigali. And as you go through that memorial and you start making those parallels with the struggles that we have experienced in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, elsewhere on the continent, and you see people who are nameless, or you see bones and remains of people whose names can never be recorded because it was just a number, a whole heap of bones and skeletons and skulls that were found. So the reason that I accepted and said, well, I will have to veer away from the normal business speeches that I give was because it caused me to reflect on the struggles that we have had as a continent. Struggles of liberation, struggles of people just trying to claim a continent that is rightfully theirs. People that got dispossessed from their countries, people that were removed, people that were caused to fight amongst each other, black brothers and sisters who ended up fighting each other because somebody came in between and decided that one was better than the other. I also reflected on the professionalism that African people have risen up from the ashes, from those graves, from the dust, to actually hold and govern and become business leaders and people of note in the different countries where they were originally nothing and where all efforts were made to make sure that they remain nothing. So today I come here to acknowledge and to be part of acknowledging the memory of our struggle heroes who departed, the wives that they left behind, the partners that they left behind, but who did not despair and feel sorry for themselves, but went on to build legacies, to build strong children who are able to carry through the legacies of their fathers. Children who did not have an opportunity of growing up under their father's warmth. Boys who didn't have a role model because their fathers had been snatched away from them unceremoniously. And when you read the book that Commissioner Masilela on Kweyama made me read, he said, the only way you are going to, after he asked me to give a speech, he says, then I have to go and read to prepare for the speech. And you see how families such as the Masilela family became a home away from home for so many people. When he related about the number of plates that were, the pots that were cooked in that home, I could relate to my own home in Atteridgeville, where activists were hidden in the roof. We had a ceiling, so there was a bit of a gap between the roof and the ceiling. So they would come out and eat and at least have shelter because their homes were hot. You couldn't go home. They were waiting for you. And then once the police find out that this is where they normally go out and hide, they would then come to the house and knock. So we had this, it looked like a globe, something like this, but you could actually shift it so that the activists could go into the roof and then you close it again. So they would search and search and search in the house and leave and not find anyone. And lo and behold, they were hiding in the ceiling. And then as soon as it was clear, they would come out of the ceiling. And to know that some of them probably passed through number 43 on their way to Mozambique, on their way to Tanzania, on their way to Zambia. It just created that additional bond that we always have as Africans. But as you read about everybody's story and hear and experience everybody's story, you can see how much we are linked. And that has become what makes sure that we can never be broken as African people. That we may have squabbles, we may go through different phases, through different governments that we feel now this one has changed and another one has to come in, but we remain resolute being Africans. The fact that Umagogo is the grandchildren, not only the Masilela grandchildren's grandmother, she became grandmother to many others. Her children learned from her to become parents to other children, and that legacy goes on. If there's one message I can give to all of us who live here, because I think we are in the phase where we are probably raising children that are a bit of a different generation from us. And we have to work even harder to get them to relate to what we relate to. It means that every year, you must take them and make sure that they see where their parents, grandparents are buried, where their grandparents used to live, and we make sure that they know that everybody that they meet is their uncle and their aunt and their grandmother and their grandfather, because we are in danger of losing this youth that is also so frustrated because they are not seeing a lot of their aspirations coming. They have seen that their parents were involved in the struggle, and that their parents made the sacrifices so that they could have a better world. And lo and behold, they are finding out that that better world is probably not as good as it sounds. Hence, in South Africa, you see students, hashtag fees must fall, hashtag Afrikaans must fall, all those, because they are getting frustrated. The same frustration, I can see the similarities. We have just come out of June 16, 2 days ago, where young people said, enough is enough. You know, these parents are taking too long to get the message through. We are going to take that fight to the streets ourselves. And we all know, I don't need to repeat June 16. The Swaziland country is probably can say it better than me because they experienced how their borders suddenly became too small because half of Soweto was trying to get out. Not because they were running away in fear or running away as cowards, but because they were going out there so that they can train and then come back and do what they believe was the best thing to come and liberate their country. Many years later, many of them returned. Unfortunately, not all of them returned. And that is why today we are honoring some of the widows, because some of the struggle heroes left during that time and did not get to come back and see the fruits of their labor, the fruits of the liberation, the fruits of the sacrifices that they have made. But we are fortunate in that they left widows. I never imagined I could say it is fortunate to be a widow, but it was fortunate that they left widows that were able to carry the banner forward and make sure that we never forget about them. They left children that became the responsibility of a whole community, a whole nation, so that their fathers' legacies could continue. I am also struck by the fact that in this year, the United Nations, or in the next year, is due to change the Secretary General. And there is a campaign going on to have the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. It saddens me a bit that it's not picking up pace as much as it should. So I'm hoping that the energy that the Masilela family is able to harness, because I have seen that they're able to take a passion and make it a big cause that so many people around this table can identify with, can leave from their homes, can leave Johannesburg, Botswana, everywhere, and come together. So that maybe when we finally have a female as the Secretary General of the United Nations, this United Nations that is tasked with ensuring that people have food, it is tasked with matters of HIV/AIDS, which affect mothers, which affect families. It is tasked with the matter of refugees, the similar types of refugees to those who left South Africa, went to Botswana, went to Lesotho, went to Swaziland, went to Zimbabwe, so that they could just get dignity back into their lives. Our continent, in spite of all the growth that is experienced in other parts of the continent, continues to be a continent that, when you want to describe it, you still describe it with poverty, still some wars and strife in some parts of the continent, lots of joblessness, lots of young people that are employed. Commissioner Masilela and I are every day trying to grapple with the issues of how do we generate and get South Africa's economic growth to a level that will at least make sure that we have less unemployment on the streets, that we have more jobs to create, and that we will not have people who believe that the only way I can make a living is if I go and steal somebody's cell phone or break into somebody's house. These are the same matters that were seized, the youth of 76 and subsequent to that, the 80s were tasked with. We should not be grappling with that. We should not be saying to our young children today, that is all we can offer you. Because that means all we are offering them is a bleak future. And that is why they cannot be constructive in some instances. So, Mama Glory Masilela, when she welcomed us here, and she spoke about the experiences they have had as a family and the experiences of seeing some of the people, that we are honoring today, broken and hurt and bleeding and being healed in their homes. As she was speaking, I said, well, she was the keynote speaker. I don't need to stand up anymore and become the keynote speaker because she has done it all. Siyabonga Sisi. Because you have taken the book, you have taken all the stories we have had and brought them to life. Because you were living them, you were there at the time, you had to be a mother, you had to be an aunt to the children that were left without a father. So finally, as I once again acknowledge the Masilela family and the spirit of Magogoism, that should really permeate into all of us. We should make it a DNA for all of us, because there is nothing that we can give back to a country that has given to us than to give back. To give back to those that are less fortunate than us. Because when you go around, whether you are issuing food parcels or whether you are building a community center, you don't take it to those who have. You are taking to those who are less fortunate than yourself. So may the spirit of Magogoism, that as we live here, it needs to get into all of us. Because wherever we all come from, we have a story to tell. We have a legacy to tell, from your siblings to your parents to all those people. And we need to make it come alive by ensuring that we are giving back to our communities instead of expecting our communities to give to us. We shouldn't be wanting those jobs from government or from the private sector. We should be seeing how we can be creative to make sure that we create the industries that are necessary to make sure that our economies thrive. The economies of the neighboring countries in SADC are quite dependent on the South African economy. When South Africa coughs or sneezes, the rest of the SADC region gets a headache and a cold. Because whether it is from mine workers, whether it is from agriculture workers, they come from the neighboring countries so that they can get some income that they bring back home. I was quite pleased because I haven't been to Swaziland probably for about 2 or 3 years now. So as I drove and I see the infrastructure and I see that it is growing, the airport, this is the first time I landed at this airport. When I left Swaziland to go to Tanzania, wherever, it was the old Matsapa airport that was very small. So I thought, has this airport grown so much? But my sister who's traveling with me, Mam Khanyisile, said, no, this is a new airport. And this is how we see that the economy is growing and that the economy there is a big future, because once you have an airport, you can have cargo, you can have all those things. So back to my dear sisters, those who are who are here. And you've noticed that I picked out Sis Dudu quite a lot, and you can see that we look alike. So you know that she's my sister, because that is who I have walked the journey the most with her. So to all the ladies that are going to be honored today, that we have come together today to celebrate, to honor, to say, you have shown us. That means a woman takes the knife by not the bone that is there, but by the sharp blade. It cuts you in the process. So we know that through there you have scars that you can show how you have been cut. And for some strange reason, I don't know, most of you were raising sons. And you know how it is to raise a son without a father. But you held that knife by the sharp end. You made sure that your boys become men that today we can be proud of, that graduate. I saw Carla's son going to receive an award, one of the orders that the president of South Africa gave recently on behalf of Comrade Paul Dikeledi. And you were like, wow, he looks just like his father. He has grown and is able to go up there, and he's a strong man that his mother is probably very proud of. So I humble myself in front of the widows today and say, if only we can take a bit out of you and learn and just let that flow to other young ladies, that even if you are not a widow, but that it is your responsibility to raise, because when you empower a woman, you empower a whole nation, you empower a whole community. And you have demonstrated to us that indeed that is true, because you did not wallow in your own misery. You went out there and made sure that you are true and leading examples to the country, to the continent. And indeed, one day, the whole world will hear about the widows of the South Africa who went on to leave the legacy that their husbands left behind. I thank you.